this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. I've moved things around now, and where I used to just walk and not think about it, I'm now bumping into stuff, head height. I thought today I'd have a chat about the little things. It's a little bit sparked by some things on the Facebook group, really. When you get a group of people on the Facebook group that are brought together by perhaps a particular type of orchid, like for instance zygos. I don't have a lot of success with those, but a few do, and they become special on the Facebook group, because while everybody's saying, oh, I've lost this number, I've lost that, mine bloomed and then all the leaves fell off, and you get all like that, and then somebody can put a picture up of one that they've had for quite a long time that's coming into bloom again, and there's a sense of pride and achievement. But that's part of the hobby, and that's what I would call a big thing. But there's lots of little things that are important too, and I'll see if I can find some that might not seem important to you, but they are to me, little things. I'll start with this one. It's got no tag on it, and I've forgotten what it's called, but this is my latest little Orchid. This was bought as a whim, really. I wanted a certain size clear pot, and Speciotic Plants on eBay had some, the size I wanted. And they came in 10s, so I thought, well, right, we'll have 10 of them. But relatively, the postage was like the same price as the pots. I thought, but they combine postage. So I had a quick look round and thought, let's see if we can throw an orchid in as well and make the postage seem a bit better. I got this little Orchid. Now, it didn't have a good root system, and some of the roots it had were old and tired, and it had what was one reasonable root, but the end had died off. Well, it shot out. I've now got a new root tip growing. Now that might not mean much to a lot of people. Well, that's what they're supposed to do. Yeah, but it might not have. And now it is. Not only is it a new root tip, but it's right next to the bark. It will attach because it's a new growing root. The old one was never going to attach. So it's only little, just a little thing. But it's good. And the leaf is pushing on as well. So it's actually growing as well as now starting a new root. So that's just tiny little things, but you know. This is another one. This is a failure turning into a success. This is my Orchid fastuosa. Now, this is a real miniature, this one, and it does clump. So it's got a little plant pushing out the side as well, which is growing on. That did actually produce a bloom, but that's grown a new leaf. That's nice. Oh, I've probably got my thumb in the way, haven't I? But that's grown a new leaf, so the little plant at the side is growing. Unfortunately, because I was a bit heavy-handed with the sprayer, the latest new leaf on there rotted. But I notice, you'll have a hell of a job to see that, down in the crown there's some bright green, so it's going to grow another one. It's a little thing, but it means the crown of that plant isn't lost. It's going to push another leaf out. So it will carry on growing, which means it will bloom again. That one blooms every year, regular as clockwork. Had it ages, that really is as big as it grows. And while we're on the subject of Orchid, where's the other one? This one up here, the plant doesn't look as good as it once did, but it's recovering. It drops old leaves and grows new ones, so it gradually extends. It sort of grows in the style of a phalaenopsis, really, but it shouldn't be dumping loads of old leaves. You know, the number of new ones should at least equal the old ones lost, otherwise it's going backwards. And better still if the new ones are greater than the ones lost. But nonetheless, it's got 4 spikes. I'll have to stick them upright so you can see them. Yeah, so we've got 4 spikes coming. Where's the other one? Right, the side there. So it's going to bloom. Yeah, so it might not look, the plant may not look at its best currently, and it will look a hell of a lot better when the old leaves do drop off. But I'm reluctant to tear them in case, you know, it leaves a wound. If the if the leaf drops off on its own, it sort of calluses naturally. That's the best way to do it. Obviously, if it's diseased, it needs to get cut off and then a bit of cinnamon on the wound to seal it. But yeah, so we're going to get some Orchid blooms down the line. They're pretty little blooms. They're not long-lived, but night fragrant, highly fragrant as well. And other things on here. The root system on this plant's getting really old and tired. And yet, some of the longest roots have still got a growing tip on them. So they're still active. And it did produce some new roots not long ago. Some growing tips. I mean, this one's gone round the back. It's gone everywhere. So it's okay. It's not at its best. 2 years ago, the plant looked better. But then it only had one spike. There's actually two plants there, there's two separate plants. And it only had one spike. You know, well, now we got 4. So coming on, little things that make the day go round. What else? Well, this isn't a little thing, but I still class this as a hell of an achievement. This is my Masdevallia ignea, a cold grower. And quite honestly, this should be dead. This shouldn't be alive. And yet it's actively growing in my warmest period. So maybe it's just acclimatized and it's okay. But most of my cooler towards cold growing plants, they just stop growing in the summer. This is their adverse conditions. The summer is not what they like, and yet some of the others love it. And then they go around the other way and don't like the winter, whereas these love the winter. So little achievements, little goals. There was something else as well. Oh yes, I showed you this. We had a look at my Latorias a while ago, and I held this one up and said, this one's dead. Several people suggested what I should do with it. I could only repeat the polite versions, obviously, but although it'll be difficult to see, down there, it's got a new growth. See if I can catch it on the camera. If not, you'll have to trust me, because it is tiny, and it's only just started. I only noticed it yesterday. But it's got a new growth. Now, the last one it produced there failed miserably, and that one may fail again, but at least it's trying. I've always said, never give up on a dendrobium. But look at the state of it. It's got no leaves left, so it can't feed itself through the leaves. There aren't any. This bulb's totally shriveled. It's gone. The other two are still a bit green, but very shriveled. It's got virtually no roots, but it has a new growth. And if it can push that on, it will grow some roots. So not dead yet. Not far off, but not dead yet. What else? An example of things I will not do again that I've done in the past. This is my Comet King. That's a Nobly type, and it was a Kiki from Rachel actually. And last year's new growth, yes, bloomed. And what did it do to the plant? Totally stalled it. Totally. You know, an old leafless cane, and its only new growth with a poor root system stalled the plant. Shouldn't have let it bloom. Now it's got a nice new one growing. Much happier with that. And it's got a root system. If that cane decides to bloom in the spring, yeah, you thought I was going to say I was going to let it bloom. I won't. Not yet. Needs to be a stronger plant. And that's now a rule for me. Despite my anticipation of blooms to see, especially if it's a first time bloomer, the anticipation of getting that to bloom is important. It's part of the hobby. Not if it's going to sacrifice the plant's strength. So from now on, they get to bloom when they're a decent plant. Then the blooming won't take the strength out of it. So nearly lost that as a consequence. It's too small with no strength. We won't be doing it again. Some other little ones. This plant here has got a hell of a story to it. I bought it years ago. It's actually called Lovely Virgin Angel. It's a Nobly type. and it just wouldn't grow. It grew kikis, but the plant itself refused to grow. That plant never ever pushed up a new growth from the base as long as I had it. And somebody else had some kikis that were taken off and planted that then grew some kikis. Somebody else had that piece, and I took off the kiki and dumped the mother plant on the grounds that, well, if you're never going to grow, then the kikis are the only thing that's any good. And I planted them. We've now got a new growth from the base, a proper growth. Looks like it's got some decent size to it too, and it's pushed out a lot of roots, so we've got roots down in the pot. So it's growing properly now. No blooms or anything, but it's growing properly. We'll have that. We have to put up with the noise next door. He's watering his plants, and his watering can makes a lot of noise. This is another little one that it came in the big box as a, well, as something I wasn't expecting to live, quite honestly. Well, it managed to hang on long enough, and we've done some work on the name, which is Jarrack something or other Brownie. Jarrack Firethorn Brownie. And somebody else did a bit of work on this one and looked it up. Turns out it's an antelope type. Now, I'm very thin on the ground with these. I think I've got one definite and one other possible, and now this one, which apparently is an antelope type. And it's grown new growth. So it's coming on. I would suggest that's a hell of a long way off blooming, but at least it's growing. So a little success. Plant saved. Has it got any roots? Yeah, it's got some new roots starting as well. So a little success. Not much of one, you might think, but we'll have it when it's going. My Rancorege's Bangkok Sunset has been sitting there doing nothing for ages. Well, it's done that. And it's doing that. So suddenly it's decided to push. Oh, and there's another one down in down the bottom as well. No, it didn't. That's an old one. That root is covered in what could be young scale, and so's that one. Yeah, the bottom of that plant is covered in scale. I'm going to have to get at that. It makes you wonder why they don't drown. That was in the bucket for about 3 hours yesterday because I forgot it. But they need dealing with. They're on the roots. They won't do them any good. There's nothing on the plant that I can see. So we need to get at that and deal with it. But we got new roots at long last. It hasn't done anything, this plant, for ages. Now we've got some new roots. We haven't got a spike yet, have we? Another little miniature success. One of my little mini fans. Amazes me why people can't talk quietly. You have to talk at the top of your voice when the person you're talking to stood next to you. Never mind. The spike has grown, decided to bloom. 1, 2, 3, there's at least 4 blooms on there. That's a real miniature Phalaenopsis, this one. Lovely little one. And it's the one that was, is this the one that was planted upside down? No, that's another one. But that never grows very big, and it had some problems. If you look at the colour of the older leaves, they're a little bit patchy and pale, but the new one's not. Hopefully, hope that one's going to stay green, I hope. But again, a little success. And this one's pushed out some new roots recently, because again, the old root system looks really old and tired. It's still capable of hydrating, they're still firm, but they don't look good. So yeah, it's a pretty little bloom, that one. Delicate little bloom. I would say that's not far off a species. Don't ask me which one. Colours on it are very, very delicate. So another little success. I don't grow Phalaenopsis very well, so any success with those is good. What else did I see the other day? Oh yeah, I don't know where I can get at this very easily without knocking stuff over, but I'll do my best because it's right up the back here. You can come out without knocking stuff? Yes. Now this is my Laelia anceps. again, this has got a story. After my visit to Rachel, my mind kicked in that Laelia anceps is a cooler grower. So last year, we actually put this down near the floor so that it got the breeze from the inlet fan to keep it cooler. And did it bloom? Did it hell? It grew 2 lovely new growths and they didn't bloom. And I had to stop and think, well, hang on, I've supposedly treated you better than I did the year before, and yet this year you decided not to bloom. Reason? I didn't change one thing, did I? Yes, I grew it cooler, but by putting it down there, it was shaded. It lost its light. That's probably all it was. It probably appreciated the cool, but it certainly doesn't appreciate the, the lack of light. So the 2 new growths this year, we have a spike. The other one has the shape that it's also going to spike, but it isn't. Let me just see if, because the leaf's closed at the moment, it hasn't fully opened. Let's see if I can just separate it without getting a mark on it. If it doesn't want to come apart, it'll have to stay closed, but it's just, yep, there's a spike inside there too. I don't know whether you can see it, but yeah, so the latest 2 new growths are going to bloom. Is it growing cool? No, it's up with the other Cattleyas. It's the same as they get. But with the light, it's going to bloom. So that's actually not really a little success, that's a big success. One of my all-time favourite Cattleya type blooms. It stops me dead in my tracks. If I'm at a show or anything and there's a Laelia anceps around in bloom, it just draws me in. It's just one of my all-time favourite Cattleya type blooms. Yeah, so little things. I mean, this we've had a look at this before, but this is my Odontoglossum crispum. Strictly speaking, it's on Psidium alexandrae now, but not in my place. It's not. I lost it. It had a bacterial rot. It just went down really fast. I managed to cut one bulb off that seemed reasonable, and at the time it had a tiny new growth. And I thought, I've lost that. If I lose this, I'll have a hell of a job getting it again. It just doesn't come up. It's a very it's got a history, that plant. Odontoglossum crispum is reputed to be the first tropical orchid that was successfully bloomed in Victorian times, and it's allegedly the start of the craze. People with loads of money, more money than sense, that could afford these, elaborate sort of greenhouses and things, wanted the tropical orchids, and apparently Odontoglossum crispum is what started the craze. I don't want to lose that plant. It's special to me, especially as where I got it from as well. I actually came from McBean's, the notoriously high-priced place. Anyway, it's growing, so it's a little success. I doubt if that new growth will get to full size. The next one may do, and if it tries to bloom, it'll get stopped dead in its tracks. It's a case of not on your Nelly, mate, until you've got your strength back, which it hasn't done yet. What else? Little things again. It's just some thoughts. I mean, my Stylus gigantea has been sitting. Well, there's 2 of them in there. They've been sitting there doing absolutely nothing for ages. Well, we've got a nice big new root starting on that one, and also you won't be able to see it because it's pointing downwards. There's a second new root growing, nice big fat one. The other one is still doing absolutely nothing apart from dropping its oldest leaf, which I don't mind it doing because it has grown 2 relatively recently. So yeah, no long-term plans for this one. Got a feeling it might be leaving my company and going somewhere else. What else have we got? Well, I suppose as I started talking about them, I'll finish on them. My zygos. I am a zygo killer. and have been for many years. And the last pair I bought, I thought I'd finally cracked it. I repotted them and they carried on growing and they stayed green and they bloomed. And after they bloomed, they started to die. Yeah? So these got repotted again. This one's managed to keep some leaves, and quite honestly, although these bulbs are shriveled, they're not totally desiccated. There's still something in them. There's some life there. And down in there, God, this is impossible. There's either a leaf in the way or my hand will be in the way. But down at the bottom there is a new growth. So it's trying to grow. The fact that it's still got some leaves and some size to the bulbs, it may well succeed, but it's going to need some better roots than that. And the other two, which is one that I split, this piece has managed to keep some size to its bulbs, but not good. The last new growth didn't plump up, but it's managed to keep its leaves, and it now has another new growth pushing on. The leaves are not happy, but it's growing. Now it's producing a new root system. Only just started, so it's got some way to go to replace the roots it lost, but not dead yet, and a little bit of progress, not a lot. And the other piece of the same plant is this one, that did the typical thing. Dumped all its leaves, but the bulbs didn't shrivel. They stayed plump, and they still are. But no leaves, can't feed itself. But again, we have a new growth, and I hate to say it, I hope that's two new growths, because if that's a flower spike, it's going to have to come off. Highly unlikely. It's probably a weak new growth followed by a second attempt. But there's only a few roots just started with that one. Only just starting to replace its roots. So what it's living on, goodness only knows, because it hasn't got a root system, but the bulbs haven't shrunk yet. So there we go. All of those three are little successes with a plant that in my environment, in my care, is almost doomed to die. All the others have managed to do that quite successfully. Some of them quite quickly too. So we may get, some progress with the zygos. I've just got a feeling that if they can start again from scratch and grow on and become reasonable plants again, I think they'll hang in there. Yeah, it's just something in these plants that in their makeup that just allows them to keel over for next to no reason. These were growing well. They looked good. They had nice healthy leaves, reasonable root systems, until they bloomed. Now we could go back and actually say, well, perhaps they didn't have as much strength as I thought, and it's the blooming that knocked them down. Because those are large spikes with large blooms with a lot of fragrance. All of that uses up energy, yeah. But then why dump your root system? Funny plant, funny plant. Here's another little success that's going to be short-lived. This tiny little Cuthbertsonii was given to me, and it is tiny. It was just a piece that broke off when one was mounted. And it's got two tiny little pieces that aren't really growing. But it has grown a few roots. There's one poking out the end there. So it's created a little root system. And what's it trying to do? It's trying to bloom on that tiny little piece. I'm not going to let it. That bud's coming off. As soon as I put it down and get a pair of scissors in my hand, it's got to come off. But I have a theory that's worth trying for this one. Yeah, I believe there's something in orchids that if you take buds off or an immature spike, the plant hasn't registered blooming yet. Yeah, whereas if I let that bloom open, hopefully the hormones in the plant will say, yay, success, we've got a bloom. now we might get some seed. And by taking the bloom off at that stage, the plant should react by saying, yeah, now I can't do seeds, so the only way I can get a new bloom is to push some new growths up. Those are nothing but little theories on plant mechanics, if you know what I mean. So perhaps trouble is, if I let that, these are quite large blooms relative to the size of that tiny shoot. If I let that get up to full size and open, that's the strength gone out of it. So I think I'd do better in this case to just take it off. And then hopefully we'll get some new growths from the base. Problems. And this one over here, the other one, this was one of the ones I got from Equigenera. My daughter bought for me, not this year at Malvern, the year before. The other one died, she bought two. The other one had a good root system, that one died. This one had virtually no roots and didn't die. And what we've got now is quite a lot of new growths coming. There's a couple around here. There's my camera. There's a couple there. There's one here. So it's starting to show signs of life. It's not a happy plant though. But there's also some new roots showing in places, down in the moss and sticking out from the base of the plant. So I think it's going to recover. But again, it's a long way off looking like a good plant. But I've found that a lot of plants that come from Equigenera can take a long time to get going. It's just the shock of leaving Ecuador and the growing environment there, getting bare rooted, so taken out of whatever it was growing in or on, bare rooted, transported. Their plants come into Germany initially, so they're then stored there, then they're uprooted again and transported to whichever country they're going to a show. So by the time they get to Malvern in June, they've had a hard life since they left Ecuador, a hard life, and they can take a long time to recover, if at all. So word of warning, if you're getting plants from Equigenera in the UK, it's all right if you get them direct and you live somewhere where they can, you know, export to you direct. You get them quite quickly. The other one I've got, if it'll come down without knocking Mr. Hairy off its perch. Now this one is a cross. This is Cuthbertsonii crossed with something else, Solowensii I think, or something. And the cross seems to have put some vigour in it, because Cuthbertsonii, when they get a hold and when they grow well, but they can take a long time to get going. Whereas this one is going mad. It's got new growths pushing on. Practically all this lot here are new growths. They were young growths when I got them, they're now maturing. It has pushed out a second bloom, so this is the oldest one, this is the new one. And blooms on this last 3 or 4 months for such a tiny little plant. They are an unusual shape for an orchid bloom, sort of trumpet-like, but nonetheless it's still an orchid. And this one's growing pretty good. I would expect several of those other new growths to push up some buds soon. They're getting up to full size. Coming on, that one, I wouldn't call that a little success though, because that was a good plant when I got it, so I expected it to grow. There's a difference between what you expect and the little surprises that please you. My Kuniko, I thought it had totally finished blooming on all of its old canes, and yet it's managed to push some more buds out. So we'll see that lovely colour again soon. Not much of it, there's only 3 or 4 buds there. But as a plant, these are the canes that will drop their leaves and become the older leafless canes. Yeah, they're starting to drop them now. So those will become the next set of canes to bloom. And what I'm pleased about is this lot up here, because these are the new growths. And there's another one just started down here. So they're probably destined to bloom in about 2 years' time. Yeah, so yeah, doing something unexpected. Here's another little surprise, probably my rarest dendrobium that was given to me. I'd never heard of it, and I still haven't. I haven't come across this anywhere apart from here in my hand. It was a tiny little piece with not very good roots. It now has roots, and its latest new growth has pushed on nicely. It's finished growing, it's not going to get any bigger, but then I don't know how big this is supposed to get. And this is Fangxin Shenensi, and it comes from an area of China on one mountainside, in one place on that mountainside. It's the only place it's ever been found, and it's a recent find, something like 2008. So this one's only been around in our knowledge very recently. Doesn't get much rarer than that, I don't think. So that's a bit special. 1, gift. 2, rarity. And 3, I wasn't sure it was going to make it. And it's pushed out a nice new growth with some roots. Little success. Hopefully one day, probably in 2, maybe 3 years' time, we might see some blooms on it. It's a cool grower though, that one. It'll always struggle a bit in my heat. And the other one I'll show you, in fact I'll get the camera down, it'll be easier. Just turn my screen round so I can see what I'm doing. Yay! Hercoglossam's got a couple of blooms opened. It often does this one. It has its mass blooming earlier in the year, and then part way through the year it'll just push a couple of little buds out. And I'm always pleased to see this one. Always pleased to see it. Yep. I mean, this is what I call the big stuff. All this is doing what I expect it to do. Yeah? So they're not surprises. They're not little treats. They're just doing what you expect. I mean, that Vanda up there has probably got one of the best spikes it's ever had. But then I expected it to do that. This one's pushed out 2 spikes together. Well, it doesn't very often do that, but it has done it before, so it's not doing anything unexpected. This one, it grows a new growth, it matures, it pushes out a spike, and it blooms. It's doing exactly what I expect it to do. This Phalaenopsis here had 4 leaves and decided to dump 2 of them, so it went down to 2. And they're not happy leaves, but it's growing a new one. And that... Oh, I must show you this. You see those speckles on the leaf? That's where the spike above had aphids, and that's aphid poo. There's still a couple on these blooms. I'll have to keep my eye on them. I've got rid of the worst of them, which was up on the on the unopened buds. That's where they get. Same on this one. But over here, I want to show you this because this is important. The plant that had the aphids was the Brassia. And the Brassia was sitting in here with its blooms up here. This wasn't there at the time, yeah, so the blooms were here. Look what's happened to the leaves underneath where those blooms were. Now that's aphid poo that's got down on the leaves, and now it's turning mouldy. That's what you call sooty mould, and if it's left there too long it will mark the leaves. So it's got to come off. It comes off easy. You don't even need to use anything special. You could wipe that off with a piece of cotton wool with some alcohol on. But whatever you do, don't leave that too long. Yeah, so that needs dealing with. I spotted it yesterday, didn't deal with it yesterday. And over here, yeah, on this plant, anywhere where that Brassia was, it will have dropped. The aphids will have dropped that, and it will turn mouldy eventually. I've got to watch these leaves over here as well because they were underneath it and they're starting to get black marks. But see if I can get a clean finger that I'm prepared to lick. A little bit of moisture and it just wipes off. Yeah? But it would be better if it was taken off with something that has a killing effect on it. So possibly, one of your fungicides or something, just to make sure that the spores from the mould are dead. But just using the rubbing alcohol will get rid of that. And if a bit comes back, doing it a second time, that's probably all you'd ever need to do. Now I don't have to worry about this one because I've only just put it there and the aphids are gone. But yeah, watch out for that. If you do get aphids or mealybugs that get a bit of a hold, look out underneath where you found them, on the leaves underneath them, because that's where this stuff starts and will get a hold. These leaves are really sticky. So yeah, that's just like a little warning shot in case you haven't come across that before. Yeah, so we all go for the big things, but sometimes the little things are almost more rewarding than the big stuff, because the big stuff I don't mean big in size plant-wise. I mean the stuff, you know, that's a well-grown plant. It's always grown well, always done well. It just does what you expect it to do. There's no surprises. You might get a surprise like this cattleya here, only produced 2 blooms. That's the first time it's bloomed for me. They've lasted ages, they're still hanging on there. They're not at their best, but they're still... No, hang on, I got a feeling this one did bloom before with 1 bloom. But, you know, the next one might produce 4. I'll be over the moon. You know, that'll be a nice little thing. But a lot of the stuff in here, I'd say 9/10 of the things in here just do what I expect them to do. So there's no surprises. It's nice when you get something new, something unusual, like the first time bloomer. I mean, this flipping Soto Annum up here is doing what I expected it to do. It's actually doing it better than I expected. It's pushing up spikes all over the place. They're tiny, they're wafer thin, but there's loads of them. They're coming out all over the place. I expected that to bloom. I didn't expect 4 spikes on a single bulb, but now that it's done that, I'll expect it in the future. So if it goes back down to 2, I'll think, oh. Yeah. But yeah, so some things are just not a surprise. Some things just do their thing. And you get to expect them to do that. When they don't, then you look into your problem, if you know what it is. Now we're going to cut the grass. Oh, brilliant. Anyway, that's it for today. And appreciate those little things, you know, where something hasn't been doing well at all and it suddenly looks like it's going to perk up. The little things can be very, very rewarding. This is doing exactly as I expected it to. No surprises there. Mr. Hairy up there, I didn't expect that to bloom, so getting a single bloom on there was a nice little surprise, because it was unexpected. Yeah, so these little things are what make it all worthwhile, I suppose. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.